Good morning and welcome to Exploring Glorantha. It's kind of hard for me to believe that this is episode 25. I am here as always, JM, your Isseries initiate, and with me is my Lancor, my Rune Lord, Evan. Evan, welcome as always. Thank you for uh, just being on the show and chatting Glorantha with me once a month for at least once a month for an hour.
Yeah, at least, as always, my pleasure. And, the fact that other people like to sit in and listen to our conversation is just, icing on the cake. So,
It is.
welcome, everyone.
Yeah, welcome. Hey, Phantom, good to see you, buddy. So today, well, before we get started, two fun announcements. One, my RuneQuest game officially starts this week. Evan is going to get to play in it. We're going to be playing you guys are the Wild Seer uh, clan. It's going to be interesting. Expect after action reports on my RuneQuest game. We're going to be playing every other week. We've got a pretty solid group of Esrolian and Sartorites in the on the western side of Sartar, so kind of the complete opposite of my
Don't
other game.
forget the Praxian. She'll be
And our
mad.
loyal Praxian. Yeah, she'll go crazy and kill you all. But also, if you enjoy exploring Glorantha and you enjoy Evan's rich knowledge of the world and deep timbre of his voice, you can sign up for Evan's game at Chaosium. There are still slots remaining as of the filming of this episode. He's going to be running 13th Age. I believe you're doing 13th Age Glorantha with your
Yes,
escalation material.
yes. Preview of Red Moon and Warring Kingdoms at the table.
So I didn't tell him I was going to plug that, but here we are, and here I am. So I would agree with that, just in general, but also specifically in Glorantha. So, what are we talking about today? Well, if you saw the little note on the title, we're going back to the Godtime. And I wrote this initial outline and then realized we covered a ton of the Godtime. So, we're beginning our view of the temporal landscape. We kind of covered the physical geography of Sartar and Dragon Pass. But here's the thing in Glorantha, history is just as important as geography. And I know you guys are probably thinking, JM, we were promised no gen ed courses in our exploring Glorantha, and it's okay. This is what we're here for. We're giving you the gloss, the overview. And so over the next couple of months, we're going to cover the rest of the God time, and then we're going to cover the first, second, and third age, kind of highlight. And then again, as always, if you're interested, just skip to the last 10 to 15 minutes of the show and be like, why is this important for game masters and players? But if you want more information, more supplementary information on what we're talking about today, go check out episode 6 and 7, which is still just hard to believe. But episode 6 and 7, which is where we cover the creation myths of Glorantha, as well as so that's the beginning of the God time, and as well as the Lightbringer Quest, which is what ends the God time and starts time up. So, Evan, as I sit back and drink my coffee, what is the God time? Like, let's explain it to people who who may just be like, "Hey, I found this Exploring Glorantha show. What the hell's a God time?"
Yeah. So, so the God time is the period of creation and the structure of the universe. It is when sort of all of everything mythological happened, and it contributes to this idea that there are competing truths that people have around Glorantha. We have confined most of our exploration to the northern continent, Ginnertella, but there is a southern continent, Pomatella. There used to be an eastern continent, Vithella, which is now fragmented into thousands of islands. That continent was shattered in the God time, and there are a myriad of beliefs about what happened to the gods and heroes before time, and how things happened and who did what, and they are all true.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, in the God time, which is now locked away beyond time, the gods are now static in their um, repeating the things that they
Mm-hmm.
did in the mythological time. Uh, but mortals can interact with them,
Mm-hmm.
and mortals can step beyond the barrier of time and enter the realm of myth, and uh, find out new things, find new connections, or they can reaffirm their beliefs. They can reenact and live along through the truths that they know. Um, but the ultimate truth is elusive because so much happened in the God time. It's hard to, if you think about, the Greek myths, for example,
Mm-hmm.
there are, heroes that cross over into each other's myths. Heracles shows up. He's in with Jason and the Argonauts, and he goes to Hades, and he frees Theseus, who, after the whole Minotaur thing, had actually tried to kidnap Persephone,
Mm-hmm.
and he was trapped there. Heracles. If you try to arrange that into some sort of chronology, it just doesn't quite work. These stories, for the Greeks, were true, and oftentimes there were local, variations. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
our hero did this with this other famous, more regional or global hero. And so if you try and put them all together, they just don't quite fit together. But the God time, everything happened, sort of at once, even though there's a sequence, even though we can put it together and everybody can kind of agree that there's sort of an arc to how things happened, that there are stages that can be teased out. But the details also all happened. All the things that make it not fit together also happened. And so that can be sometimes a little hard to wrap your head around, but it means that these competing, evolving ideas about what happened in the God time, these fragments that humanity and the other intelligent beings, now on this side of time have, um, are pieces of the truth that they can use to connect with the divine,
Mm-hmm.
to connect with the spiritual world, with the one of the universe, depending on how you conceive of things, and approach the truth, and continue to renew the existence of the universe through this connection to this supernatural power.
Yeah, and
And
oh,
that's sort of something that just makes Glorantha entirely unique.
well, it's unique, but it's also far more true
Yes.
in our, as our world, right? You have, as you said, right? There are various myths of the end of Hercules' life. We've kind of sanitized them all into one, but various writers all wrote about how Hercules died. You have this idea that Jeff, you posted this great Jeff Richards quote
Mhm.
in our outline, which will be going out to our patrons later this week. And the key takeaway for me is myth is not fact. Myth is observation, right? It's experiential. In, I mean, I talked a lot about this on Behind the Screen, and I'm going to talk a lot more about it for the 100th episode. But your game is true because you and your friends played through it. Even if Evan runs the Great Sartar campaign and I run the Great Sartar campaign, the experience of what happened is completely unique. And that's the closest we get to interacting with myths in kind of our normal lives. There's this idea that, as Evan said, the reenactment, right? Sartorites reenact Orlanth's story with Heller, the rain god, every year because that's why the rains come. If you mess up that interaction with the myth, you could screw up the rains and, therefore your livelihood. These are things that happen routinely on a cyclical pattern. And every year they happen at the same times, at the same moments. These are the beats of the and the rhythm of living in Dragon Pass. Most of us in kind of the West, we don't have really that cyclical pattern of holy days, religious festivals that kind of remind us at various points in the year, kind of that we live beyond, we interact with something beyond just kind of our regular daily secular civil lives. So it's one of those real distances, and it's one of the things that I think makes Glorantha more real to me than, say, I don't want to denigrate another setting, so I'm just not going to, but makes Glorantha more real to me because a lot of other fantasy settings just feel like a modern calendar, a modern rhythm dropped into a fantastical world. So, as Evan said, go ahead, Evan. It looks like you had another.
Oh, well, so if you want to think about, so you talked about, if the ritual doesn't go right, and then there's a local effect
Mm-hmm.
on perhaps on the weather, etc. And but that's also because somewhere in the sort of quantum reality, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
cross it over with sort of science fiction, beyond the wall of time in Godtime, there was a time when Orlanth also failed.
Mm-hmm.
There was a part where he didn't retrieve Heller maybe the first time, or at some time again,
Mm-hmm.
the events, like everything happened, and
Schrodinger's
so
myth.
right, exactly. And so that part of the God time, you can the unfortunate things beyond, the failures of your deities can also have an effect on you,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the need of heroes and heroic action
Mm-hmm.
is to go in and you know make connections, make repairs, forge new paths, because I've heard this said and I have repeated it. This is not my own idea, but Glorantha is essentially a post-apocalyptic setting in many ways. The
Mm-hmm.
God time was there was a perfection there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's beyond the things that have been lost in God time are literally unimaginable. The things that remain beyond the wall of time are just pieces of what was there. And so everything is potentially there that could be rediscovered and reconnected, some new connection. And I think when we talk about like the Silver Age, which is sort of the that the penumbra between time starting and real history moving forward, people were rediscovering, people
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that fragments of belief, that this thing that we believe in and this other thing believe in, that's actually, both of those are Orlanth or other
Mm-hmm.
gods and things of that nature. And so I think we'll see that, we'll try to tease that out for you all. But this idea that sort of everything happened in God time, everything that people believe on this side of time is true, is somehow connected, and the whole that cannot be conceived by mortal mind, but can be experienced through not only cyclical rituals but like daily living. That, as JM was saying, we have sort of lost that feeling of living in a world touched by the divine
Mm-hmm.
very often, particularly in its cycles. But for Galantha, like, you start up in the morning and the gods and the spirits are there.
Mm-hmm.
That you are, there is no, like just church on Sunday sort of thing. It is constant and ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no division between sort of civil life and religious life. It is all one thing,
Yeah.
and that comes from the connection to back to the God time.
So you may be sitting here going, well, then why are we talking about this? If it's everything and everywhere at all, at all times, how do we even break this down for our exploring Glorantha credo of, hey, this is Glorantha 101 for you. Well, there are generally five great movements. Think of it like a symphony. There are five great movements, and myths tend to fall into one of these five or overlap in only one or two categories. So there's creation, which we covered. Go back and listen to episode 6. And creation is where everything is established. The great runes, the prime movers, the form and the power runes. Well, actually, not the form runes, because the form runes really come into effect during the Golden Age, the Green Age, the age where things are established and take shape and pattern. Then we move into the board game era. Wait, no, the God's War era, the Storm Age, also known as the Lesser Darkness. And then, not to be outdone, Chaos says, "Hold my beer," and gets us to the Greater Darkness. And so, we're really going to touch on these middle three eras in Godtime Part 2. So, quick review. What you think of how creation started really kind of depends on your view of the world, either a mystical, theistic, humanistic, or animistic view of the world. But they all sort of agree on the main movements of this time. Things were formed, ordered, and created. Um, as Evan put in our notes, this is sort of the commonality of the monomyth. Now, when we get to the Second Age, my friend Richard, who did the Grand Campaign with me, he and I differ on Campbell's works, and I would argue that even though Campbell was influential to the formation of Glorantha, he ends up making Campbell the bad guy of the Gloranthan world, because Campbell's monomyth is essentially the hammer that a lot of people look at all myths. And while Greg may have started on the path really liking the hero's journey and the idea of the monomyth, I personally think that the God learners come to the point where he realizes there's something even more deep and more real about these things than just let's order them all in the same way. And he takes the Campbellian approach and gives it fully over to the God learners, who are generally despised and reviled in all of their forms, next only to the lunars.
Hey there.
So, yes, this is where the power runes are created or incarnated depending on your view of things. Go back and listen to that first episode. I'm just going to cover them very quickly and very high level, right? And if you're looking at your RuneQuest character sheet, which I'm sure many of you are, because the character sheet is a map of the world. It is, if we accept that humanity is just a microcosm of the macroverse, then the RuneQuest character sheet is a microcosm of Glorantha, because we have, Akos, the god of stability; Larnst, the god of motion; Ularia, the goddess of love and attraction, so we could call that fertility; uh, Kargantor, the god of war and conflict; uh, the goddess of truth and illusion, because I'm not going to try and pronounce those right now; Harana Lore, or Ilor, the goddess of harmony; and Raslaf, the god of disorder. And then out of that come the elemental runes. So we're just covering the top part of the character sheet. Dame Darkness, Zaramaka, water; Gata, Mother Earth; Aether, light and heat. And then finally, the god whose birth starts the wobble in the perfect plate spinning, Umoth. If you guys remember, Umoth doesn't have a place for himself, and nobody really wants to give him a place. So he sort of sets his feet upon his mother and his shoulders upon the ark of his father, the Sky Dome, and sort of pushes them apart to create what is known in Glorantha as the middle air, or the storm space. And that's the first sign that things are not going necessarily according to a plan. It creates the first instability, the first bit of disorder through which chaos eventually enters the world. So now we hit one of the most fertile parts of Gloranthan mythology, this is the green or the golden age. This is where things are ordered and the form runes are created. So what do we mean by the form runes? Evan, take it away.
Well, so the form runes are the things that really attach to life. So beast, man, plant. Dragon newt is really, of course,
Okay.
the
First one.
the yeah the the weaving in of the dragons and what the the cosmic dragon belief um, runs through this, and everybody can sort of agree that dragons are important, but different. There are different perspectives on it. So, but the dragon newt rune um, ties to the dragons, but the dragon newts too are a little bit of um, a devolution. They are the dragon's eggs that didn't make it to become dragons right away. They have uh, a period of self perfection that they need to go through, and then the other things, the other living things, which the dwarfs, the Mastali, generally object to because it's messing up their perfectly ordered universe. You have the plant rune, growing things,
Mm-hmm.
the man rune, which you have humanity, but everything you join a an elemental rune to the form man rune, and basically that we call a man rune. It's really a sort of intelligent life, an
Mm-hmm.
independent, intelligent life. So you get the darkness man, that's the trolls, the Uz, the plant man, the Aldriami,
Mm-hmm.
stone or earth man, the dwarfs, um, and you start to see a non-divine population
Mm-hmm.
that fills throughout the world, that plants all the living things, and then animals, the beast rune, and intelligent life, who begin to uh, you know magnify the veneration of the gods, to follow them, to um, to spread out, trying to uh, you know spread the influence and control of the various factions
Mm-hmm.
of deities. And in the green age and the golden age, everything is sort of working out. It is this perfect time, right up until the storm god show
Right.
up.
So before we jump over there, I mean, this is where the spike is created. This is,
Yep.
the gods are living in perfect harmony on the spike. We have,
Yeah.
again, I
We
just sort
should.
of, oh,
Oh, I mean, we've talked about the spike.
yeah,
See the other episode,
see the other
but
episode.
the spike is the cosmic mountain. It
Yeah.
is the center of the universe, where the court of the gods is at its summit, and all it is the center point that holds the universe together, um, and forged by the great maker Mostal, out of living true stone, and so it is again the ideal,
Yeah.
the
It's the,
paradise with the mountain and the great summit that reaches all the way to heaven.
right. And this is where we have Yelm as the perfect ruler. The unchanging ruler is the other thing to keep in mind. Everything is perfect, but perfect according to the view of Yelm. Also, this is where I mean, as Evan pointed out, this is just one of my favorite times to imagine of different gods going, hey, I like that man rune. What happens if I smash it together and get centaurs or, all of the beast folk? What happens if we take the man rune and put sea together? Well, that's where we get our merfolk. But also, this is where a lot of Ernalda's myths come from, because at this point, one of the things about the Ernalda cultists that we talked a lot about in the Esrolia episode is that Ernalda is the Great Mother, not just of the Sartorites. Ernalda shows up in a variety of people especially non-human myths, right? Flamal and Ernalda were married for a time. The Earth's bounty went out to basically anyone who was willing to step in as a husband, protector, king role. Eventually, kind of unifying here towards the end, as Ernalda is the queen of the universe, right? As Yelm's wife. And we'll see that if you go back and look at our Lightbringer episode, you know that it's kind of out of love or lust for Ernalda that Orlanth causes the lesser darkness. But as Evan said, Umoth shows up and is a violent and unpredictable, unplanned sort of entry into creation. He creates the middle sky, which creates an imbalance. Um, as Evan said, the spike reaches up all the way to the heavens, and right, the sky dome kind of now we have this sort of wobble, if you will, this instability. Mostel is definitely not pleased. No one is pleased at the birth of Umoth. And then Umoth wants followers, right? In addition to wanting a place for himself to rule, he wants followers. So he creates the lesser storm gods, of which we have, Yinkin and Orlanth and Stormbull and others. Excuse me. And the problem is now they want followers. And suddenly this new idea enters into the celestial courts of, well, wait a second. I don't have to be happy just with my followers. If I take your followers, I'm more powerful and I get more worship and I get all of the benefits of this. And suddenly, with the birth of Storm, the gods need to compete in order to gather worshippers, and more cracks invade reality, more disorder. And remember, in Glorantha, disorder and chaos are not the same thing. Disorder is closer to our idea of entropy, luck, the way random chance affects things. However, where there is a lot of disorder, the chance for chaos, this violent dissolution, this severing from everything you are, everything you hold dear, everything it means to be you, your memories, your person, your body, your attachments to the gods in the community, the more disorder, the more likelihood that chaos is going to rise. And this takes us into, the full. Is there anything you wanted to add about the Storm Age before we get into, or the God's War until we get into the Lesser Darkness?
Well, um, I mean, the key thing during the Gods' War is, of course, as the gods are competing and exploring, um, at the beginning, it's all sort of intramural because there is no death. But
Intramural
I
God's
mean,
War. We need that on a T-shirt.
That's right. I mean, people get hurt, but they get better,
right?
Because there is no death. But uh, but but you know the trickster Yermal, the trickster, which the Sartorites and many the Orlanthi call Yermal, but trickster is beyond a single culture, discovers death in the underworld, and and the first mortal is killed,
Right, grandfather
bringing
mortal
death to the world.
who just wants some more power. Right, everyone else has power, and he is he is not satisfied. I mean, this is something interesting that also ties back to a lot of the creation stories in our own world. They're not grandfather mortal is not satisfied with where the gods have allotted him in existence, and so he is willing to try out this new power that the trickster has found in the underworld. Sadly, this new power is death, and we all bear we bear that power in Glorantha. We all have the ability to die at any moment for any reason.
That's right. So first the death god gets humaked for
Mm-hmm.
the honorable death god. but the power is stolen and passed from God to God as it uh, is coveted, and it's replicated, and the trickster, is instrumental in sort of um, passing it from deity to deity, at the delight of, the sort of consternation, the disruption that it is causing. And so, as we get to the end of, uh, the God's War struggle, where um, it was a more of a competition,
Mm-hmm.
um, although there were um, great armies marching, great conflicts, etc. It turns with the appearance of death,
Mm-hmm.
and we find that not only mortals die, but that gods die.
But the gods died. The kind of crowning death, pun intended, is the death of Yelm in the contest with Orlanth. And so the sun dies. And the sun, and not just the sun, but the apex of the hierarchy, the ruler of the universe dies and flees to hell. And the trolls, not liking the fact that the sun is in their nice, cold, dark underworld, invade, and even more death breaks out. And I love this quote that we have. So first of all, chaos starts breaking into the world. And what's interesting to note is it's because of the instability of the God's War that chaos breaks in. And the first breaking in of chaos is this strange creature, Karst, that Larnst, the god of motion, sees and is like, "Haha, I will crush it beneath my feet." And uh, it actually wounds Larnst's footprint, right? I'm remembering my
Yes.
Glorantha geography. And then doesn't
Yes.
Karst flee into what becomes Snakepipe Hollow? Am I remembering that
Um,
correctly? Anyway,
it does. Yeah, it does. It does retract, but it bites him, and is not. It is not crushed,
right.
and the blood falls, creates the foul blood woods,
That's what I'm thinking, the
and
Foul Blood Woods.
and
So,
yeah, wounded Lawrence he's wounded for a long time, which he is the holder of
movement.
mobility, the
Yeah.
the change, not only but not only physical movement, but the change
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to experience change, internal
Yeah.
change.
So this wounds creation itself. This is the first time that we see really what chaos does. Chaos wounds creation itself. Now, the instability is, increased. Things are breaking down. And a lot of people will point to Raslav, the god of disorder. But Evan, I don't know. This quote is from the well
This is
of.
yes, I mean it's originally from the essay in Cults of Terror,
Yes.
it is available on the Well of Dahlia.
I feel like you should share this because you added this to the
Oh
outline and
well,
it's brilliant.
yeah, yeah. So um, some blame everything on Ratzlaff and his followers. So followers would include probably the trickster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but such blame only shifts attention from the real culprits, the gods themselves, who persisted in acting against their own welfare.
This was very much a selfish, though God's War was all about the selfishness of the gods. And at any point, they could have, in theory, taken a step back and gone, hey, everybody, all right, pencils down, weapons down. But they could not see beyond their own selfish need. And in doing so, in this attempt for a greedy grab for more, they only hastened their own destruction and inevitable end. Because, and we talked about this in the Chaos episode. If you want to know more about these guys, go check out the Chaos episode. Again, just any discussion of chaos includes multiple topics that are not fit for a lot of consumption. So just know that there's probably something in there that will disturb you greatly. But the unholy trio, Ragnalar, who's Orlanth's brother and suffered horribly at the hands of giants, has gone a little bit bad. He perpetrated horrible acts on Theed, who then just sort of embraced them. And Malia was a an earth goddess who was like, you know what is great? Like more life to the point that uh, her version of life, diseases were more important to her than the preservation of other life. So these three get together, and in a what I can only gloss over as a horrible, horrible rite, summon, give birth to Whackboth the Devil, which is now the incarnation, if you will, of chaos within Glorantha. It is the personification, the general, the leader, the face of chaos. And under the devil, under Whackboth, which is just fun to say. Like, I like saying Whackboth as opposed to the devil. Um, they gather all of these new creatures, all of these corrupted creatures, because chaos is not just itself. Chaos is what it takes in. It corrupts and spits back out. The Scorpion Men, right? There's a point in time where the Brew are not a corrupted chaos creature. They are just a form of beastmen. But now the Brew fully go over. The Ogres, the Karst Kids, the Scorpion Men. This army of chaos besieges the Spike, the home of the gods, which is already filled with so much instability that even the gods are blind to it and exploiting this. Mostel's spike of living true stone is shattered. And so the center cannot hold. The center breaks apart. And with that starts the great darkness. Evan, anything you want to add? I realize this is my one of my favorite times in the God time, so I was just like and plowed ahead.
Favorite time, huh?
Yeah,
Um,
that's right, Rook. I
yeah,
am a Scorpion Man.
Cults of Terror really did a job on you.
Oh, it really did. It was. I told you it was the first Glorantha book that I ever owned. I knew nothing about the
Indeed.
game system. I just consumed the Cults of Terror.
Yeah. For more of that story, check out our first episode.
That's right.
And for more about what happened after the spike exploded, check out our water pantheon episode. But suffice to say, Magasta, you know, it the king of the sea gods does realize that stuff just got real and summons all of the waters to fill the hole in the cosmos that has been left by the
Mm-hmm.
destruction of the spike. And thus there is a giant whirlpool at the center of the world now that leads into the underworld, but that has, that stops the world from basically collapsing into itself.
Also,
So
we covered in the water episode, but that's why water flows down to the sea in
yep.
Glorantha, right? Everything in Glorantha does not have a scientific explanation. It has a mythic explanation. So all water flows downhill to the sea because Magasta summoned all of its vassals and its servants, and they left their springs and they rushed to his aid.
And so not every physical principle is officially explained, but the general principle is there. And so if you have a principle that's important to one of your adventures, you should come up with a mythic explanation and have your players explore that. And that is one of the delights of playing in Glorantha.
Yeah.
I guess the important thing to understand is that with the destruction of the spike and this ascendancy of chaos, it's not only that that some gods die, start to join Yelm in his court of the dead in hell. But some gods, things that we don't even necessarily comprehend, start to be destroyed. That
Mm-hmm.
not only what chaos can't is not only destroying things and corrupting things, but they are also chaos eliminates
Yeah.
things from the universe. They cease to exist, and uh, the idea that maybe there's some little fragment that maybe escaped chaos, that's another potent story seed. This
Yeah.
once was you know a god of a place or of an idea, or of an experience, and there's just a residual, just something, but that maybe can be revived, and that has been a good thing and a bad thing in Glorantha, which we'll explore more. But
Well, yeah, and I mean, that whole idea is sort of at the core of all of the lunar myths of the seven mothers. That Zedena was killed, destroyed, eliminated at some point in the Godtime, and was a forgotten and lost deity that the seven mothers discovered and brought back bodily uh, into the world.
yeah,
So then we hit the Great Darkness, which go check out our episode called the Lightbringers Quest. I believe episode 7. This is the end of the God time. This is the battle of I fought, we won, where all of the little communities still alive of mortals on in the world battled for supremacy, battled to survive. And in doing so, all of these little resistances formed the larger resistance that allowed the Lightbringers the time they needed to complete the Lightbringer quest, form the Great Compromise, and not the thing is, remember, it's not restart time because time wasn't a thing, but the Great Compromise is time. And so all of the God space now exists in this quanta state, as Evan brought out. And now mortals exist in a linear state moving forward. We discuss that far more, but not in a uh, as simply as possible. If you want more information on a lot of these topics, I cannot recommend Ludo's podcast enough. Um, the God Learners podcast. He also does the Journal of Runic Studies. He explores a lot of these concepts in far more detail, in far more, um, I'm just going to say in far more detail, but is a wonderful person to listen to. We did an episode where we talked about, well, not so much Glorantha, but jackals. But we will be doing a 13th Age Glorantha episode, hopefully, here with him soon.
and we should also note their Lankor, my high priest Jorg, who is the co-host. We got the sub in on the Wonderful God Learners podcast because Jorg was unable to make it, and Ludo very kindly invited us to guest host. But yes, Jorg has
Yes.
many and profound, deep thoughts about all of these things, and you will find lots of really great discussions on that podcast, in depth. And Jorg is very active on the RuneQuest Facebook group,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can sometimes tap into his wisdom there.
And Ludo is on the Iconic Production Patreon. So if you are a member of
He
the Iconic
is.
Production Patreon, which is patreon.com/Iconic Production, if you join us, you can jump on the Exploring Glorantha channel, and Ludo's on there not only just talking about Glorantha topics, but posting links to the latest episodes of the God Learners and the latest Journal of Runic Studies. So just a little bit of cross-platform promotion. But you get to interact with not just us, but other Gloranthan experts.
Yeah. And what I just say about this is that of course we explored sort of the one of the survival stories that leads up to the I fought we won the battle struggle in our Prax episode. the survival, the decision of who is going to be, the caretaker, and who are the eaters and who are the eaten.
Mm-hmm.
Very, the world is ending. Very, very difficult decisions are made. Once animals and people were all one, and then some places, that there were these decisions where, in order to survive, things had to change from that sort of
Mm-hmm.
perfection to, a more uh, a different a differentiation between beings,
Yeah.
and that plays out in many local myths and experiences. um, and Prax is a very evocative one, but some things don't survive. We know that some of the statues at the Paps in Prax
Mm-hmm.
are of animals that no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
They're gone. They existed in the Green Age, but they didn't survive the Lesser and Greater Darkness.
Yeah.
And that also replicates throughout the world, that there are beings and uh, races and animals that only existed at the time, beyond the wall of time in the God time, and are lost. And there's a lot of interesting stories about, sometimes bringing or trying to bring some of that back.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And that could
the
be an
Red
epic
Cow
story.
campaign.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be an epic story, or it could be a horrible tragedy too. There are all those things. So
Well, let's get into. We've got about 15 minutes left, which is, if you skipped ahead, now is the time to arrive. We're going to talk about why this is important. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway from this is, much like everything else in Glorantha, your Glorantha will vary. Yes, there is a ton of published myths and stories and official stories that you can find the ones you like and hang your campaign on. I've done this. It's wonderful to read the stories and move forward from there. But as Evan said, this is this quantum state of myth. You can have local myths that are very important to your group's clan that no one else in the world has heard of. If you want to create a myth that becomes the foundation for your campaign, recovering something that was lost, destroyed, or absent in the God time, you have complete freedom and carte blanche, and I would argue, from day one, permission from Greg to go forward and do that. That's what he wanted. I mean, he said that multiple times in multiple interviews. Pithily said your Glorantha will vary, but this is foundational to the world. The myths, the stories. If you go through the clan creation document, which is, I believe, still on Drive Through RPG.
sadly, no.
No.
But
Uh,
hopefully it will be coming
Hopefully it
back
will return.
under the Quest Worlds
Yeah.
branding. But
If any,
that still is to be
yeah. It it
coming.
it led you through these myths. And here's the thing. Come up with something cool. And the best part about creating a myth in Glorantha, you just need a seed to start. You don't have to have this grand iambic pentameter or heroic pentameter uh, poem, although it's awesome when you do. You actually can start with a seed, and as your players explore it, dig deeper and expand upon it. So, Evan,
And,
what is
oh,
something you would want to say to people as either GMs or players why this is so important?
well, first I want to mention, that there, out on the web, there are a couple of places where, the kind of clan creation, the kind of experiences people have done for their own campaign, and then the kind of, local myths. I think if you want a model for that, if you're still trying to figure out how to implement that, Six Seasons in Sartar, Company of the Dragon and the
Yes.
Six-Tailed Wolf, that arc of 3 books by Andrew Montgomery, um, really lay out and give you a lot of tools to do that.
I'll put those links to those in the show notes. Help me remember to do
Yeah,
that. Future
absolutely.
JM,
So
this is your.
yeah, so yeah, if you're wondering, that is one way to do it, and he really makes it an integral part of the experience of those adventures. And yeah, I think that for me, understanding the God time, it's not. It's great to understand, for example, the monomyth. Although the God learners are reviled, everybody basically agrees that they got the monomyth basically right. That the arc of how things progressed in mythological time can be constructed into a sort of coherent whole, and that the prime moving roles, the sun god, the storm king, the earth empress, etc., all are important, and they may wear different masks, they may have different names in different parts of the world, but all of that uh, is echoed in the local mythology around the world in some way. On the other hand, the idea that within this sort of grand story, there are so many variations,
Mm-hmm.
and that with the opportunity for it to be yours, I think is key. That you may be starting with published materials, maybe Johnstown Compendium stuff, maybe some of the old classic stuff, or just the things that are coming out now from Chaosium. um, but as the things happen at the table, um, uh, the way that the game is constructed, the way that the world is constructed, there you're going to be called upon to add things in, because there will be events that will happen that need explanation, that need connection, and you should feel uh, ready to go back and pull from a story, or just invent a story,
Yeah.
because that's the real experience. Jeff Richard, the sort of our caretaker of Glorantha at Chaosium, and leading explicator, says that there's reading the myth, there's hearing the myth told to you, there's watching the myth sort of being performed, and then there is being in the myth, performing it
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And that's what role playing at the table is. And so in some ways, you are experiencing and renewing the universe at the table with your friends, um, by playing it. And um, and so I think that it's not that much different than what JM said. It's foundational, but uh, I think that you you find out by that is the key thing, is that you can know enough, and then you can just fill it in. And if
Mm-hmm.
if there's something contradictory, that's okay. It's still true. What happened at your table is true because you experienced it.
I quoted that passage from the book of Hjortly mythology in a paper that I wrote about the liturgical structure of role playing games.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So how do we use these in the games as GMs and players? Well, first of all, I think this, if I were to break it down simply, is if you need to know why something exists, is missing, or works the way it does, the answer is always because God time. And it is, right? Where do lost spirits and gods, local gods come from? Well, because God time. Check out the Dragon of Thunder Hills in the GM pack, or the Broken Tower in the Quick Start. That's actually the Broken Tower in the Quick Start ended up defining the whole of my RuneQuest game. Uh, because they brought this lost goddess back to their Tula. It's the source of powers, secret knowledge, treasures, magic. If a character wants something cool, have them go explore the Godtime to bring it back. As Evan said, Glorantha is essentially a post-apocalyptic setting. This allows you to go back into the time when time is perfect and highlight how much has been lost and how much has been rebuilt in another way. And then, Evan, I'm going to let you expound upon this quickly because we got 5 minutes left in the show. But I love this idea that so many of the big events of time and also the greatest tragedies in time have resulted from humans attempting, or mortals attempting, grand projects to bring back the God time, even though the Great Compromise sort of explicitly says that can never happen. So, Evan, let's kind of hit that, and then we'll talk a little bit about hero quests, and then talk about what's
Well,
going on next.
this is a little bit preview of coming attractions, although it weaves in things we've talked about as well. You know, in the first age, the second council decides that the way to help heal and reorder the world is that they need a perfect god, and so they build something that they first call Ausentalka, and then reveals itself as Nicelor, and then is revealed to be Gabaji, the deceiver, and which ends up ending the first age with the struggles between Gabaji and Arkat, the hero, who it just seems to destroy this chaos god on Earth. But it came from this. We need to do something
Mm-hmm.
because the world has been broken. We need to help bring it together. We need to unite it. We need to have an echo of that golden age, and we can bring it back. And we'll assemble the pieces of this lost god, and everything will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very much what happens with the seven mothers and the rediscovery of the moon goddess. um, and it also seems out of the second age there are many things that happen in the second age. The god learners, the empire worm's friends, trying to connect to um, some to find a system to uh, understand and order the universe and transform it. And for the god learners, it is to sort of control god time and to understand its workings through the monomyth. For the empire worms friends, it's to sort of spiritually transcend through draconic mysticism. And in Pavis, there are hints about this, that there was an experiment. Pavis himself was sort of an impossible being, a person born of a human and a dryad. These are not interfertile species,
Yeah.
and
Half
yet
elves don't exist.
that something that could have happened in the god time, though,
Mm-hmm.
because things, it was just a different perfect time. And so he seems to be in building his city and including all of the elements in it, maybe trying to create uh, 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 an expression of heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to, it didn't quite work, but the pieces are maybe still there.
Yeah.
And another thing I threw, that there is a religious requirement on the Garzine subcult of Isries, that if they get a piece of the god Ginnert, which is if they have a piece of a hyena's skin, because Ginnert was destroyed by chaos and the hyenas ate the remains of the
Mm-hmm.
god, they have to take it into the waste to try and find a way to add it to uh, the project of reconstructing this lost earth god, the male fertility element of the northern continent. God times echoes,
Mm-hmm.
and these mad, incredible utopian projects bring back the gods, restore what was lost. are really interesting, powerful, sometimes terrifying stories.
Yeah. And then the last thing is, as GMs or as players, hero quests are the main ways to interact with the God Time. Don't underestimate the power of hitting the high holy days for each of your players, because each of your players are going to follow, in theory, a different cult. So make sure you know when those high holy days are so that they can participate in a God Time quest, a hero quest, specifically focused on that cult or subcult. And then the next time it comes around next year, hit it again and hit it again. Because what it does is it helps establish this rhythm and something for that player to look forward to. Well, what do I want to take out of this hero quest the next time? If they want to go get something powerful to save or to save their clan or to use on their clan's benefit, hero questing 8 times out of 10 is far more interesting in Glorantha than go to this ruin and delve this vault. But then also for players who like the very mythological or philosophical side of Glorantha, finding new truths, making new connections, establishing new paths into God Time, or in the case of my group, seeing something shiny while on a hero quest and going off path and possibly destroying part of their clan's history. These are things that can happen only while interacting in the God Time, and it is one of the most unique aspects of Glorantha. So that brings us to the end of this episode. And uh, next episode, possibly next 2 episodes, I've started the outline, and it is we're again trying to keep it 101, but there's a lot to cover in the first age. We may cover sort of everything up to Arkat's War and then do Arkat and Gabaji as its own episode because it's so foundational. We're going to start with the first age, and then we're probably going to do something similar with the second age, and then bring us to the third age, which is kind of where the game is set, and probably do an entire episode on the Hero Wars. And that's, in theory, most of the arc of this year. So I'd like to thank everyone who's been in the chat, Rook, Phantom, Tinker Hellraiser. Always thanking Evan. Any final thoughts before we sign off for today? If you say we are all us, no.
Uh, I think we're gonna cover a lot of very interesting things for for the rest of our discussions this year, and um, the the message is always make it your own, and do it bit by bit, and the God Time. Yes, it's big. Everything is in the God Time, so it's huge. You can't put it anywhere except outside of time. But you only have to go and get one thing to help spur your game along, to add to your imagination, and then you can go back to that well again and again, and what you build at your table will be unique. It'll be yours, but it will also be Glorantha.
Yeah.
And so go out and do something fun and amazing.
Yeah.
Maximum game fun.
Maximum game fun. So until next month, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. We'll be back on Tuesday with Behind the Screen as well as the second half of our Deadlands adventure. And then next Sunday, we'll be covering our the next part of our Swords of the Serpentine look. So until then, have a good one.
Bye, everyone.